Hollywood's golden age was a time of glamour, luxury, and excess, where the most famous stars lived lives of indulgence and success. However, behind the glitzy facade, many actors and singers of the time faced struggles, often ending up with very little. As the years passed, fame faded, and financial troubles set in, leading to the tragic downfall of some of Hollywood's most beloved personalities. In this third installment of our exploration, we delve into the stories of more old Hollywood stars who, despite once enjoying fame and fortune, ultimately died in poverty. Buster Keaton is widely considered one of the greatest silent film stars of all time. Known for his deadpan expression and daredevil stunts, Keaton's career flourished in the 1920s. His films like The General, 1926, and Steamboat Bill Jr., 1928, are still celebrated as masterpieces of cinema. During his heyday, Keaton was one of the highest-paid stars in Hollywood. However, his fortune didn't last. In the 1930s, Keaton's life took a downward turn. After a series of bad business investments and a tumultuous marriage, he lost control of his finances. Keaton also struggled with alcoholism, which contributed to his personal and professional decline. By the time he reached his later years, the man who had once been the toast of Hollywood was living in relative obscurity. In the 1950s, Keaton was struggling financially, living in a modest house with no significant income. In his final years, Buster Keaton faced financial ruin. Despite receiving some help from friends in the industry, he passed away in 1966 at the age of 70, largely forgotten by the public. Keaton's story is a sobering reminder of how fleeting fame can be, and how even the brightest stars can fall into obscurity and poverty. Hattie McDaniel is best known for her groundbreaking performance as Mammy in Gone with the Wind, 1939, for which she became the first African-American woman to win an Academy Award. Her victory was a historic moment, but it did little to protect her from the racism and exploitation she faced in Hollywood. Despite her immense talent, McDaniel was often relegated to stereotypical roles, mostly as domestic workers or slaves, due to the racial limitations of the time. After the success of Gone with the Wind, McDaniel's career continued, but it was a constant struggle to secure roles outside of the typecasting that defined her career. McDaniel spent much of her later years in financial difficulty. In 1952, after battling cancer for some time, McDaniel passed away. She died in relative poverty, unable to enjoy the wealth and fame that had come with her Oscar win. McDaniel's story reflects both the limitations placed on African-American actors in early Hollywood and the tragic way that even breakthrough success could not shield her from the struggles of the industry. Jackie Coogan's story is one of Hollywood's most famous and heartbreaking tales. As a child star in the 1920s, Coogan became one of the highest-paid actors of his time. His most famous role was in The Kid, 1921, a film he starred in alongside Charlie Chaplin. Coogan's performances made him a household name, and he was beloved by audiences. However, despite earning millions of dollars during his childhood career, Coogan's fortune was stolen by his mother and stepfather, who had control of his earnings. By the time he turned 21, Coogan discovered that he had been left with almost nothing. His parents had squandered his earnings, and there was little left for him to live on. The injustice he faced led to him becoming a staunch advocate for child actors' rights. This eventually led to the creation of the Coogan Law in California, which mandates that a portion of a child actor's earnings must be set aside in a trust fund. As an adult, Coogan's acting career was not as successful as it had been in his youth. He struggled with typecasting and never quite regained his former level of fame. By the time he passed away in 1984, Coogan was living in financial hardship, having never recovered from the financial betrayal that marred his youth. Florence Lawrence is often credited as the first movie star in Hollywood. In the early 1910s, she became one of the most popular actresses in the world. Her fame was so immense that audiences would flock to theaters just to see her on the screen. She became known as the Biograph Girl for her work with the Biograph Company and is often recognized as one of the earliest actresses to receive star billing. Unfortunately, her career hit a rough patch in the 1920s as the film industry shifted and talkies, movies with sound, replaced silent films. Lawrence's career quickly plummeted as she struggled to transition to the new format. Her personal life also suffered, and she was unable to regain her earlier success. By the time she died in 1938, Lawrence was living in poverty and was largely forgotten by the public. Her tragic downfall highlighted how quickly a star's status could fade in the rapidly changing Hollywood industry. Ted Healy was a well-known comedian and the original leader of the Three Stooges, a group that would go on to become one of the most iconic acts in American comedy. Healy had a strong presence in vaudeville and film during the 1930s, but he was often overshadowed by the outrageous antics of his co-stars. While he was popular at the height of his career, Healy's personal and professional life took a turn for the worse in the years that followed. Healy was known for his hard drinking and erratic behavior, which made it difficult for him to maintain relationships and hold on to his career. After parting ways with the Three Stooges, Healy's career failed to recover. His personal life also became increasingly tumultuous, and he struggled with addiction. In 1937, Healy died suddenly after a bar fight, the result of an altercation that occurred just hours before his death. At the time of his passing, Healy was living in near poverty, having never been able to secure a lasting comeback in Hollywood. His untimely death left him largely forgotten by the public, and it wasn't until years later that his contributions to comedy and the Three Stooges were truly recognized. And Jean Harlow, one of Hollywood's most iconic figures, achieved fame in the 1930s as the first blonde bombshell. With her platinum blonde hair and sultry on-screen presence, she captured the public's imagination in films such as Red Dust, 1932, and Platinum Blonde, 1931. Harlow became a top star at MGM and was one of the highest-paid actresses of her time. Despite her immense fame, Harlow's personal life was filled with tragedy and hardship. She suffered from health problems, which began with a kidney infection that led to a fatal illness, uremic poisoning. Her death at just 26 years old in 1937 shocked Hollywood and left many questions unanswered. Harlow had been struggling financially by the time of her death. She was not only the breadwinner for her mother and family, but had also invested in several unsuccessful business ventures. After her passing, her estate was left in disarray, with disputes over her wealth and assets. Despite being one of the most glamorous actresses of the era, Jean Harlow's death was marked by confusion and financial instability, and her family had to deal with the mess left behind. George Raft was one of Hollywood's most famous leading men in the 1930s and 1940s, known for his roles as tough guy gangsters in films like Scarface, 1932, and They Drive by Night, 1940. Raft's on-screen persona as a smooth-talking, dangerous character made him a natural fit for gangster roles. At the height of his career, Raft was one of the highest-paid actors in Hollywood. However, Raft's life after Hollywood was far less glamorous. Despite making a fortune from his films, Raft made poor financial decisions that led him to lose much of his wealth. He famously turned down the role of Sam Spade in The Maltese Falcon, 1941, which later made Humphrey Bogart a superstar. His lack of financial foresight left him in an unfortunate position when his film career began to decline in the late 1950s. By the end of his life, George Raft was financially struggling and was forced to live in relative obscurity. He reportedly spent his final years living in a modest apartment in New York City, far removed from his once glamorous lifestyle. Raft died in 1980, and although he had left behind a legacy of iconic roles, his financial downfall overshadowed much of his success. Rita Hayworth, once known as the love goddess of Hollywood, was one of the most beautiful and famous stars of the 1940s. With her stunning red hair and voluptuous figure, she became the face of films such as Gilda, 1946, and CoverGirl, 1944. Hayworth was an international sex symbol and one of the highest-paid actresses of her time. However, her personal life was tumultuous, and her financial woes began to mount later in life. She married 5 times, and her relationships with men were often troubled. She was married to Prince Ali Khan and later to Hollywood studio head Orson Welles, but neither union ended well. As she aged, her popularity waned, and so did her income. Rita's financial ruin was compounded by her struggle with Alzheimer's disease, which she was diagnosed with in the 1970s. After her health declined, she was unable to work, and much of her money was drained away due to poor investments, alimony payments, and the expensive lifestyle she once led. She died in 1987 in relative poverty, and at the time of her death, she had little financial support left. Hayworth's tragic story is a cautionary tale about how fame and wealth can slip away, leaving behind a legacy of forgotten hardship. Sally Rand was one of Hollywood's most notorious figures during the 1930s, famous for her exotic fan dances and burlesque performances. A beautiful blonde actress and dancer, Rand appeared in films and was a staple of 1930s nightlife, becoming widely known for her tantalizing fan dancing routines. Her performances at the Chicago World's Fair in 1933 propelled her to national fame, and she was considered one of the top sex symbols of her time. Despite her fame and the money she earned from her performances, Sally Rand's later years were filled with financial turmoil. Her career, which relied heavily on her exotic dancing and beauty, began to decline as the years passed. After her dancing career ended, Rand attempted to make a living in various ways, including running a costume shop and giving dance lessons. However, her financial difficulties continued, and she eventually died in 1979 in relative obscurity and poverty. Sally Rand's once glamorous lifestyle faded into history, and she was left with little more than memories of her earlier fame. The fan dancer, who had once been the toast of Hollywood, was buried in a pauper's grave, and her story serves as a sobering reminder of the fragility of fame and fortune. Thelma Todd was a rising star during the early years of Hollywood, known for her comedic roles in films alongside the likes of the Marx Brothers and Laurel and Hardy. Todd was known as the ice cream blonde and became one of the most recognizable actresses of her time, gracing the screen in films like The Kid from Spain, 1932, and The Party's Over, 1934. Unfortunately, despite her early fame and success, Todd's life took a tragic turn. In the early 1930s, she began a relationship with wealthy businessman and film producer Roland West. Despite their high-profile romance, Todd's career began to stall in the mid-1930s. She struggled to land substantial film roles, and the instability in her personal life only worsened. Tragically, in 1935, Thelma Todd's lifeless body was discovered inside her car, parked in the garage of her friend Roland West's home. The circumstances surrounding her death remain mysterious to this day, with some speculating that she was murdered, while others believe she died of carbon monoxide poisoning, possibly from inhaling fumes from her car in a secluded garage. Regardless of the cause, Todd's death at the young age of 29 marked the tragic end to a promising career. Though Todd was once considered one of Hollywood's top comedic actresses, her sudden and mysterious death overshadowed much of her success. The question of whether she died under tragic circumstances or if her death was a result of mental health struggles remains unanswered. Her family faced financial difficulties in the aftermath of her death, and Todd, like many others in Hollywood, is remembered as a talented but short-lived star whose fortune faded too quickly. The stories of these actors and singers serve as a stark reminder of how quickly fame and fortune can fade in Hollywood. Despite their talents, achievements, and contributions to the entertainment industry, many of these stars ended their lives in obscurity and financial hardship. Whether it was mismanagement of wealth, changing tastes in the industry, personal struggles, or simple misfortune, their journeys highlight the often unpredictable nature of fame. While some, like Jackie Coogan, fought back and became advocates. For others, many were left to face the grim reality of their fading careers and financial ruin. It's a sobering look at how the fast-paced world of Hollywood can quickly discard its stars once the spotlight dims. These stories, however tragic, remind us to appreciate the fleeting nature of fame and the importance of financial planning, support, and advocacy for those who work in the entertainment industry. Hollywood may be glamorous, but behind the scenes, many of its stars have faced difficult and humbling challenges, and the truth of their struggles deserves to be remembered.